Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something you've definitely heard of, but maybe don't know too much about. Microplastics.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's been in the news a lot recently. Little bits of plastic, bad for the ocean, that kind of thing.
Right. We hear about them, but what's the real deal?
Yeah.
We wanted to get to the bottom of it, so we went straight to the source, Wikipedia. And let me tell you, there's a lot more to this story than meets the eye.
Absolutely. Some of the things we found were pretty surprising.
So let's get started. First things first, what are microplastics exactly?
Well, according to NOAA and the European Chemicals Agency, microplastics are any type of plastic fragment that's smaller than 5 millimeters.
5 millimeters, so like smaller than a grain of rice.
Smaller even. We're talking tiny, tiny pieces, sometimes so small you need a microscope to even see them.
Wow, okay. So they're small, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're a big problem, right?
Well, about that. It's important to understand that there are actually two main categories of microplastics: primary and secondary.
Okay, what's the difference?
Primary microplastics are those tiny plastic bits that are already small from the get-go. Things like microbeads, which used to be in everything from face washes to toothpaste.
Oh yeah, those little beads that were supposed to exfoliate your skin.
Exactly. Or the microfibers that shed from synthetic fabrics like polyester and nylon every time you wash them.
Wait, so my clothes are shedding tiny pieces of plastic every time I do laundry?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then you have secondary microplastics, which form when larger pieces of plastic break down over time.
So like that plastic water bottle I accidentally left in the park.
Exactly. Or those plastic bags we see stuck in trees sometimes. As those items are exposed to sunlight, wind, and rain, they start to break down into smaller and smaller pieces.
And those smaller pieces eventually become microplastics.
You got it. And here's the really scary part. Scientists estimate there are trillions. Yes, trillions of pieces of microplastic in our oceans right now.
Trillions! Seriously, that's almost impossible to imagine.
It's a mind-boggling number. To put it into perspective, imagine taking all those tiny microplastics and lining them up end to end.
Okay, I'm imagining it.
They would circle the Earth multiple times. And it's not just the oceans either. Microplastics have been found everywhere, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, from the tops of mountains to the deepest parts of the ocean.
So we're talking about a truly global problem here.
We are. And as we're about to find out, the impacts of this microplastic pollution are far-reaching and potentially devastating.
Okay, so we've established that microplastics are everywhere, but how are they actually impacting the environment?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is the impact on marine life.
Makes sense, since that's where most of the microplastics seem to be ending up.
Right. And because these particles are so small, they're easily ingested by marine animals, from tiny zooplankton all the way up to whales.
And that can't be good for them, right?
Not at all. In fact, there's growing evidence that microplastics can have a range of negative effects on marine organisms. For example, some studies have shown that when fish ingest microplastics, those plastics can actually leach harmful chemicals into their tissues.
So it's not just the plastic itself that's the problem, but also the chemicals it carries.
Exactly. And those chemicals can then bioaccumulate up the food chain, meaning that larger predators, including humans, are potentially exposed to higher and higher concentrations of these toxins.
Yikes. That's not something I want to think about.
That's-
It sounds like we're talking about more than just seafood here, right?
You're right. Remember how we talked about microplastics being found in soil and air?
Yeah, pretty hard to forget that one.
Well, that means they can also end up in our crops and drinking water, potentially exposing us to microplastics through multiple pathways.
So this isn't just a problem for the ocean, it's a problem for the entire planet, including us.
Precisely. And there's still so much we don't know about the long-term impacts of microplastic exposure on human health.
This is definitely starting to feel like a bit of a horror movie. Are there any positive takeaways here?
Well, the good news is that now that we're aware of the problem, people are starting to come up with creative solutions. For example, remember how we talked about those microfibers from our clothes?
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that my washing machine is basically a microplastic factory.
Well, there are companies now that are developing special filters that can be attached to washing machines to capture those microfibers before they enter the water system.
So it's like a microplastic net for your laundry.
Exactly. And there are other innovative solutions being explored as well, like using magnetic liquids called ferrofluids to extract microplastics from water.
Magnetic liquids. Okay, now we're really getting futuristic.
I know, right? But it's just one example of how people are using science and technology to address this problem.
That's encouraging to hear. But it sounds like we still have a long way to go.
We do, but the more we learn about microplastics, the better equipped we'll be to develop effective solutions. And in the meantime, there are things we can all do in our own lives to help reduce our plastic footprint.
So where do we go from here? I mean, it feels like microplastics are everywhere. What can we actually do about it?
It's definitely a daunting challenge, no doubt about it. But I'm actually hopeful about the future. There are some really innovative solutions being developed to tackle this problem head on.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Tell me more about these solutions. What's got you feeling optimistic?
Well, one area that I find particularly promising is wastewater treatment. Think about all those microfibers we talked about earlier, the ones that shed from our clothes during laundry.
Right, my washing machine's
What?
dirty little secret.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, there are companies now developing advanced filtration systems that can actually capture those microfibers before they even enter our waterways.
Seriously. So it's like a microplastic filter for your washing machine.
You got it. And some of these filters are incredibly effective, removing up to 90% of those tiny plastic fibers.
Wow, 90%. That's huge. So even just doing laundry could become a much more sustainable activity.
Exactly. And the innovation doesn't stop there. There's also been a lot of research into using bioremediation techniques, which involve using microorganisms to break down microplastics into less harmful substances.
So it's like harnessing the power of nature to clean up our mess.
Precisely. And the more we learn about these microorganisms, the better we can engineer them to be even more effective at breaking down specific types of plastics. It's a really exciting field with a lot of potential.
That's really cool. So we've got new technologies, bioremediation. It sounds like there's a lot of promising research happening. But what about right now? What can we do in our everyday lives to make a difference today?
Absolutely. While those larger scale solutions are in development, there's still so much we can do as individuals to minimize our own plastic footprint.
Okay, give us the rundown. What are some easy things we can do in our daily lives to make a difference?
Well, a lot of it comes down to being more conscious about our consumption habits. For example, do you really need to buy that single-use plastic water bottle?
You're making me look at this plastic water bottle in my hand very differently right now.
Yeah. I know, it's everywhere we look, right? But switching to a reusable water bottle is such a simple change that can make a big difference. And the same goes for bringing your own reusable bags to the grocery store, choosing products with minimal plastic packaging, and saying no to plastic straws and cutlery whenever possible.
So that's those little everyday choices that can really add up.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of raising awareness. Talk to your friends and family about what you're learning, share information on social media, contact your elected officials, and urge them to support policies that promote plastic reduction and responsible waste management.
It's about using our voices and our wallets to create change.
Exactly. The more people who are aware of this issue and demanding change, the faster we can turn the tide on plastic pollution.
So what's the main takeaway here? What do you want our listeners to remember from this deep dive?
I think the most important message is one of hope and empowerment. The microplastic problem may feel overwhelming, but it's not insurmountable. We have the power to make a difference, both through our individual choices and by advocating for systemic change. It's not about being perfect. It's about doing what we can with what we have where we are.
Beautifully said. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together and that even small actions can have a ripple effect. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep fighting the good fight against microplastics.